and veterans get their insurance through TRICARE. So what we're talking about here is a very defined amount of individuals that we're trying to address and not affect the entire system. Obamacare turned our healthcare system on its head to address the pool of individuals who don't fall under the buckets that I mentioned. Our plan that we're talking about today with the House will ensure that those individuals will receive the care that they need if they want an affordable cost while not sending rates skyrocketing. Obamacare was an overcomplicated bill that served the special interests and not the American people. These over 974 pages that were passed, and then we were told we had to read them, are filled with carve-outs by over $1 billion of healthcare-related lobbying that was spent on the year that Obamacare was crafted. Our plan, in far fewer pages, 123, much smaller, much bigger. So far, we're at 57 for the repeal plan and 66 pages for the replacement portion. We'll undo this, and remember, half of it, 57 of those pages, are the repeal part. So when you really get down to it, our plan is 66 pages long, half of what we actually even have there. We'll undo the massive disaster and replace it with a plan to return health care back to the patient. As the President outlined in his joint address, he expects 5 core principles to guide Congress through this health care process. First, ensure that the American people with pre-existing conditions have access to coverage. Second, ensure a stable transition for Americans currently enrolled in the exchanges. Third, provide more equitable tax treatment through tax credits for people who already don't receive tax advantage health care from their employer. And I know that's something that Secretary Price was talking about. For the vast number of people who get their insurance through their employer, they're getting it tax-free. They are not taxed on that benefit, which is something that is not afforded to people who are in the individual market who either run a small business or are sole proprietors. Fourth, we should expand the power of health savings accounts to return control to Americans over their health care dollar and decisions. They should be able to choose the plan they want, not the plan that's forced on them by government. And finally, we should give our state governors the resources and flexibility they need with Medicare to make sure that no one is left out. This is the Obamacare replacement plan that everyone has been asking for, the plan that the President ran on, and the plan that will ultimately save the system. It's also a culmination of years of dedicated work and careful thought by Republicans to find a replacement that will best undo the damage that's been caused by Obamacare, while ensuring that all Americans have peace of mind during this stable transition period. These are the principles for which conservatives have been fighting for years. President Trump looks forward to continuing the dialogue between the administration and the Hill on saving the health care system. What's important to remember is that we're not going to be able to do all of this in one bill. As the Secretary mentioned, there are 2 other steps as well that allow us to get more of the President's plan accomplished after we pass this first important major step. The second piece is already underway, and that's what Secretary Price can do through executive action. He has already rolled out a handful of important actions, including the major marketplace stabilization regulation to help bring stability to the collapsing insurance market. He'll continue to enact a number of policy changes in the regulatory and administrative space to achieve what the first step cannot because of the nature of reconciliation. The third piece of executing the President's health care plan requires 60 votes in legislation, maybe more depending on what we can do and when. That's how we'll move forward on the policies of purchasing across state lines, lowering drug prices that just came up, and repealing any of Obamacare's premium spiking insurance market distortions that can't be done through this current bill. Also yesterday, in addition to speaking with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, the President also had separate calls with Prime Minister of Japan, Abe, and South Korean's acting President Hwang. During both of these calls, the President reiterated the United States' ironclad commitment to stand with Japan and South Korea in the face of the serious threat posed by North Korea. He also emphasized that the administration is taking steps to further enhance our ability to deter and defend against North Korea's ballistic missiles using a full range of the United States' military capabilities. Moving on to today's schedule, this morning the President had a call with President Kenyatta of Kenya. He'll have a readout for that call soon if it's not already out. The President and the First Lady also announced the official reopening of public tours here at the White House. You may have seen the President stop by to greet some of the first visitors on their tour. We're looking forward to welcoming the American people back to what is affectionately referred to as the People's House. We are the world's only executive residence and office of head of state that also serves as a museum free to the people. Visiting the White House is obviously an experience that's uniquely American, and we encourage guests of all ages to come visit the White House, their house. Also this morning, the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, held a press conference announcing that Chinese ZTE Corporation has agreed to a record-high combined criminal and civil penalty of $1.19 billion after the company illegally shipped telecommunications equipment to Iran and North Korea in violation of sanctions. This civil penalty is the largest ever imposed by the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security, and pending approval from a federal judge, the combined penalties between the Commerce Department, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Treasury would be the largest fine and forfeiture ever levied by the U.S. government in such a case. This settlement tells the world that the days of flouting U.S. sanctions regime or violating U.S. trade laws are over. President Trump is committed to ending the disrespect of American laws and American workers. So back to the schedule for a second. This morning, the President also received his daily intelligence briefing. He had lunch with Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who will continue to be an important partner as the President's nominee for the Supreme Court. Judge Gorsuch begins the confirmation process in the next couple weeks. At this moment, the President's leading a discussion on immigration with Senator Cotton and Senator Perdue and members of the White House senior staff. The President and the Senators are expected to discuss the merit-based immigration reforms that the President mentioned at last week's joint address. Later this afternoon, the President will lead a meeting with the House Deputy Whip team focused on repeal and replace of Obamacare. There will be a pool spray at the top of that meeting. The gather time is 3:20. The President will also meet with Richard Trumka, the President of the AFL-CIO. They're expected to discuss the importance of investing in our country's infrastructure and renegotiating trade agreements like NAFTA. There will also be a pool spray at the top of that meeting, and we'll have further details on it. This evening, the President will visit with a group of Boy Scouts who are in Washington to participate in a near-century-old tradition of sharing Scouting's achievement with key government officials. Looking ahead, I want to let you know that the President will be welcoming at least 2 foreign leaders in the coming weeks, and I expect additional announcements of additional leaders later. But first, next week, Chancellor Merkel of Germany will visit the White House, and the following week, the President will welcome Prime Minister al-Abali of Iraq. With that, I'll kick it off with your questions. Jonathan, Carl.
Hey, Sean, it's been a
Jonathan.
full... Thank you. Sean, it's been a
You're out of practice.
It's been a full 3 days since the President said that President Obama had his wires tapped, his phones tapped at Trump Tower. In those 3 days, has the White House come up with any evidence whatsoever to prove that allegation?
Yeah, I addressed this multiple times yesterday. I think the President, we put out a statement on Sunday saying that we would have no further comment, and we were asking the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees to look into this concern and report back.
Can't the President just ask the FBI director?
Well, I think
Has he asked him?
No, the President has not, and I think that we've gone back and forth with you guys. I think there is clearly a role that Congress can play in its oversight capabilities. They made it very clear that they have the staff, the resources, and the process. I think that's the appropriate place for this to handle. I think if we were to start to get involved, you would then write stories about how we were getting involved. So it's a no-win situation. I think the smartest and most deliberative way to address this situation is ask the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, who are already in the process of looking into this, to look into this and other leaks of classified information that are troubling to our nation's national security. So, as the President said in the statement on Sunday, we believe that investigation, as well as the investigation of other classified leaks and other important information that threatens our national security, be looked into by the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, and then we encourage them to report back.
Can I ask this? Do you believe that President Obama ordered something like that?
I get that that's a cute question to ask. My job is to represent the President and to talk about what he's doing and what he wants, and he has made very clear what his goal is, what he would like to have happen, and so I'll leave it at that. I think we've tried to play this game before. I'm not here to speak for myself. I'm here to speak for the President of the United States and our government.
Sean,
Zeke.
One following up on what Secretary Price said earlier, he was asked by John about whether the administration was willing to make for the American people right now who like their doctor or like their health insurance plan, is the White House willing to make a commitment to them today that when this replacement bill is passed, if it passes, that they will at the end of that be able to keep their doctor and keep their health care plan? And secondly, just changing gears radically onto China overnight issued some some strong rhetoric and promising consequences for the deployment of the THAAD missile system to South Korea. If you could respond to that.
So on the first piece, I think, look, one of the things that's important to understand about this process that's very different from when the Democrats did it. You recall then Speaker Pelosi said you're going to have to read the bill to know what's in it. I think there's a big difference. This is the bill. It's right here. It's on the website. We're going through regular order. If you go to the House of Representatives website, Speaker Paul Ryan's website, it's listed. Everybody can read it, and it's going to go through what they call regular order. We're not jamming this down anybody's throat. It's going to go through a committee process. All parties involved, all representatives in the House will be able to have input into it. I think that's the way to conduct this process, is to do it to allow people to watch the process happen in the committees, allow members of Congress to have their input in it, to make amendments, to see that we get the best bill that achieves the goal for the American people. When it was done the last time, it was jammed down people's throat. And look what happened. You had 974 pages that people struggled to read afterwards and figure out what had just gotten passed, and the consequences were frankly devastating. So to your point about keeping your doctor, in a lot of cases you've lost your doctor for a couple reasons. One, they may not participate in the plan. They may not take insurance at all anymore. Two, they may not take Medicaid. Or three, they may not take Medicaid. And the list goes on about why they might not be there. Or your plan, the plan that you got, is no longer accessible. As the Secretary mentioned, 1/3 of all counties in the United States no longer take Medicaid, or excuse me, have only one plan that you can choose from. So it's a fact right now that in most cases, you have no choice. In many cases, you've lost that ability. Our goal is to actually add more choice and more competition. Right now, the government tells you you must have this plan or you will pay a penalty, and within this plan, here's what you have to have. We've lost the element of choice and competition in healthcare. And by bringing all of that back, I think there's a higher degree of likelihood that you're going to get the plan that you want and you're going to get the doctor you want, because it'll be your choice, not the government's choice. And that's a big, big difference. This plan was jammed down everybody's throat. And the consequences took their plans away, it took their doctors away, and it drove up costs. This plan allows more competition, more people to enter it, and the American people and patients to make a decision on what plan they want. If they have a plan and a doctor they like, then they're going to choose a plan that allows them to continue with that doctor. But there's going to be more competition and more choice, not less. And that's frankly what you have now. With respect to China, I think I addressed this yesterday. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Japan and South Korea and doing what we can to protect that region in particular from an attack from North Korea. We understand the situation. We continue to work with them. As I mentioned, the President spoke to both leaders yesterday. We provided a readout of those calls. But we obviously understand the concerns of China. But this is a national security issue for them. Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. How concerned is the President with the situation between North Korea and Malaysia right now?
Well, as I said, I think we're very well aware of what's going on in the region. The President obviously had a conversation with, in particular, the acting president of South Korea last night, and with respect to what's going on there. And again, I'll refer that to the National Security Committee to give you further. Cheryl Bolden. Cheryl. I know. I'm sorry I forgot you yesterday.
I appreciate it. So two then questions. One on health care. If the CBO scores this bill and it does not provide the amount of coverage that the Affordable Care Act did, will the President still support it?
Well, I'm not going to get ahead of, Secretary Price mentioned this, let's not get ahead of the CBO going through this, but I think, as I mentioned to Zeke, one of the things that's important to understand, this bill has to be done in the phases that it has to address the repeal part of it and the replace part of it. There are only certain things that we can do through reconciliation, and then there's the regulatory piece that we can do through action that the Secretary is empowered to do, frankly, under Obamacare. And then third is an additional piece of legislation that addresses things. But there are cost-saving measures that in competition aspects of this that have to be included in phase 2 or 3 because they are not allowed in the reconciliation bill because of the nature of how reconciliation works on Capitol Hill. So I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that how that score comes out from the Congressional Budget Office will depend on whether they look at it specifically with just a phase one or whether they look at it in its totality. But I'm confident that if you look at what's going on right now, Cheryl, it's unsustainable. I mean, premiums in state after state, as Dr. Price mentioned, they're up 25% on average. Arizona's 116%. I think, Oklahoma's in the 50s. Minnesota's in the 40s. I mean, this is unsustainable for a family to continue to pay the premiums that they have, and for individuals, small business owners, etc. So the question is, can we allow people to go on this trajectory where more and more of their paycheck is getting eaten up in a plan that's frankly not giving them choice, doctors, or plans that they want? This plan, I think, clearly achieves those goals a lot better. It gets the cost containment down, it gets price control under, and it allows doctors and plans to re-engage in the marketplace as they were prior to this. And I think that is a major aspect. Go ahead. Hold on. Cheryl waited.
Thank you. From yesterday, I had a nominations question. Is there something that's preventing the White House from submitting the nominations of Sonny Perdue for Agriculture and Alex Acosta for Labor?
I believe Alex Acosta was sent up to the Hill earlier today. We should have an announcement officially out, so sometimes there's a little bit of a lag. I apologize between my office and but that one's up, and I'll check on Sonny Perdue. I think some of it's just in coordination with the Senate, so pardon my time. Trey.
I have two questions for you. First, will the president offer a correction to his tweet this morning that states that 122 prisoners were released from Gitmo by the Obama administration and then returned to the battlefield? You can take that first.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the president meant in totality the number that had been released on the battlefield, that have been released from Gitmo since individuals have been released. So that is correct.
Then my second question, is the White House concerned about this new information that came out in WikiLeaks today that U.S. intelligence agencies are potentially purposely providing vulnerabilities to tech products here in the United States?
I'm not going to comment on that. I think obviously that's something that has not been fully evaluated, and if it was, I would not comment from here on that. Kevin. Sorry.
Sean, I was going to ask about branding. The president in the past has put his name on buildings and different products. When it comes to health care, does the White House feel that the bill being presented today should be known as Trump Care from here on out? I know it was asked to the Secretary. And at what point do you think that the transition should go away from Obamacare to the new administration?
Well, as soon as it's repealed, we can get rid of that. I think that'll happen quickly. And as Secretary Price mentioned, I think we're less concerned with labels right now and more in terms of action and results. And I think that's what our focus has been, is getting that cost down, getting that choice back that we mentioned. Yeah.
DHS is reportedly considering separating families that cross the border illegally. How does the president feel about that?
I'm going to. That's a DHS matter. I mean, we don't get involved in either customs or ICE enforcement. So I think that's a question better reserved to both DHS and ICE specifically. Jim.
Oh, thanks, John. On the Obamacare question, one of the criticisms on this is that there is still a de facto individual mandate because it allows insurance companies to increase premiums up to 30% if there's a gap in coverage. And I have one more.
Well, that's not. I mean, that's not a. I mean, the difference is under the current bill that's here, if you don't buy insurance, you pay a fine. Under the current bill, you don't have. There's nothing that mandates you to buy insurance. That's up to an individual. So, I mean, by its very definition, it is not. Can't be considered that. What's your second one?
Okay. Well, I mean, you don't think it's a de facto mandate in the sense that there's a penalty in place as there is now. I mean, it's not by the government, but it's by the insurance company.
Right, but there's no. That's. I mean, I think you answered your own question on that one.
I have one more.
Okay.
It's another topic. But the president has blamed the Democrats in the Senate for blocking the cabinet. Last Thursday, the Republicans actually called a recess early. Previously adjourned on Thursday early. Previously, they called a recess the week before. Does the president have any plans to call for the Senate to remain in session and Congress stay in session until they approve nominees and maybe even also?
Well, this isn't a Republican issue. I mean, it's not Republicans that are playing beat the clock on a lot of these nominees. I mean, we've discussed this since the transition time. I mean, there were several nominees that, frankly, weren't even considered controversial by the standards of Senate Democratic leadership, and yet have been held up over and over again. I don't think that's a very different scenario than going back and being with constituents, which was on the Senate schedule. So I don't think that's a synonymous thing. Do we have Michael Medved ready to go on for our Skype question? Michael.
Sean, thank you very much. Obviously, today there was a big emphasis on Obamacare, which is profoundly important to the American people. But it seems that too often in the last several weeks, the administration has gotten distracted and media have gotten distracted by talk of wiretapping at Trump Tower, or the president calling his predecessor a bad and sick guy, or criticizing the ratings of Celebrity Apprentice. Do you think the White House could do a better job of focusing on the issues that really matter, the reforms that matter to the American people, rather than getting distracted to these subsidiary conflicts as we move forward into the coming months?
Thanks, Michael. Respectfully, I would say that we have been focused. We're here talking about Obamacare and the need to drive down the cost and access for health care for every American. I think that's a pretty significant thing to be focused on. Yesterday, we were talking about the president's effort to continue to keep the nation safe, to make sure that people aren't coming into the country who aren't here for peaceful purposes. The president's talked to almost 50 world leaders. He's had 30-plus executive actions on all sorts of stuff, from regulatory aspects to things that will create more jobs. I think that's a fairly focused effort. That being said, I think, look, whether it was candidate Trump, President-elect Trump, or now President Trump, the president has always made it very clear that one, or not he made it clear, but I think the voters made it clear that one of the things that they appreciate about him is his ability to be authentic and to speak very forcefully and very directly with the American people. And that's an aspect that I think was central to why he was elected, is because he's not a canned politician that's going to give the same state answers over and over again. Sarah.
Going back to Fred's question, conservatives have started to call this Obamacare light. President Trump has promised to fully repeal Obamacare, but this bill leaves a lot of the structure of Obamacare intact. If this is the policy that passes, is President Trump confident in the future he can say that he fully repealed Obamacare?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, the first half of the bill that we put forward repeals it. There are three things. Each phase that we've talked about, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, there's a repeal and replace aspect in each one. But Republicans and conservatives have been talking about added competition and driving costs down for decades now. Selling across state lines, small business pooling, all of those things have been part of conservative plans for a long time. And I think instilling that competition in it, allowing more access, I think there's a big difference. There is no, we have, for the longest time, if you're a conservative, you think about this right now, that you have anyone who has an employer-based, their job comes from an employer that gives them health care. They're getting a subsidy. They're getting a credit. They don't pay taxes on their health care, and their employer doesn't either. That's a huge disadvantage to anyone who's a sole proprietor or owns a small business. And so, frankly, to allow the playing field to be leveled and allow small businesses, which are frankly the job creators in this country, to allow entrepreneurs and self-starters to get the same tax treatment that a Fortune 500 company gets you, is a very conservative principle. And again, I think, look, one of the things that's important, Sarah, is for all of the people who have concerns about this, especially on the right, look at the size. This is the Democrats, this is us. There is, you can't get any clearer in terms of this is government, this is not. And I think that part of the reason the visual is important is that when you actually look at the difference, you realize this is what big government does. It crowds out competition, it drives up prices, it stifles entrepreneurship and innovation, doctors leaving the markets, more and more people not taking Medicaid or TRICARE. That should concern people. When you've got veterans that can't, because most of the time Medicaid and TRICARE are tied together. So when you have those systems not accepted by doctors, that means the lowest of the people on the low-income scale and people who have served our country have fewer and fewer choices. That alone should be a problem and concerning for many people. But the premium spikes are another problem because, again, even if you're in the exchange, now you're seeing over and over again that happen. You're also seeing young people decide that they'd rather just pay a penalty because the cost of those basic programs is out of reach for a lot of young people who are just entering the job market. But again, I think the greatest illustration of the differences in the approaches is that size. Our bill, which is a tenth of the size, does repeal and replace in what their bill just did in massive government bureaucracy. And that is a big difference. Jim.
Just want to ask you, I mean, you had the Health and Human Services Secretary out here. You just talked about this is the Republican bill, this is the Democrat bill. Is that the president's bill? Is that his health care bill?
That is a bill that we have worked with Congress. We feel very good about where it is. We are looking forward, as I mentioned earlier, the president's meeting with the whip team to encourage them to support it and to build it out. I don't think, and I'm not trying to be cute here, but I think it's not his bill or their bill. It's a bill that we have worked on with them together. We're very proud of where it stands now. The big difference, Jim, is that unlike before, as I mentioned, when the Democrats jammed it down people's throat and said, waited to get that 60th vote before with Senator Kennedy still around, and then basically said, literally, you will have to wait and see what it looks like before we passed it. We not only posted it out there for everybody to look at, but by sending it through regular order, not just putting up for a House vote, but sending it through the committee process, allows Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike to offer up amendments and suggestions, and the House will work its will. Now, we will continue to give guidance and thoughts and suggestions, but I think the President's core principles are what's going to guide us as we head through the Hill and then over the House and then to the Senate.
And just one quick follow-up on Jonathan Karl's question, because the President made a very serious allegation over the weekend, and I think we would all be remiss if we went through this briefing and not try to get you on camera to at least offer us some evidence. Where is the evidence, where is the proof that President Obama bugged President Trump?
Well, I answered this question yesterday on camera on your air, so just so we're clear, I know this is now will be twice, but I think I made it clear yesterday.
But since yesterday,
nothing has changed. No, it's not a question of new proof or less proof or whatever. The answer is the same, and I think that that there is a concern about what happened in the 2016 election. The House and Senate Intelligence Committees have the staff and the capabilities and the processes in place to look at this in a way that's objective, and that's where it should be done. And frankly, if you've seen the response from, especially on the House side, but as well as the Senate, they welcome this. And so let's let the Senate do their job, and the House, Intelligence Committees, and then report back to the American people.
Will the President withdraw the accusation? Does he have any
Why would he withdraw it until it's adjudicated?